But Leader, you're on mute, Leader.
This blasted device, honestly. Welcome, board members. Good to see you all. Please, can I remind you that we are being live streamed today to allow for public access, and also that the meeting is being recorded and will be available for subsequent viewing online. Hopefully by this stage we're all familiar with online meetings and everything will run smoothly, we hope. But could I suggest that you keep your camera and microphone off unless you're speaking, and remind you to type speak in the chat function or use the raise your hand function if you want to contribute. Stephen and Kirsty will be assisting me to ensure that I get to everyone, but if nobody sees you, put your camera on and wave. Stephen, could I ask you to give the position about attendance today?
Thank you, Leader. Apologies from Professor Griggs. There's no direct substitute, although Jane Morrison-Ross is here from SOS. Apologies from Laura Douglas. However, Jane Maitland is here as Vice Chair of the IGB. Apologies from Councillor Rob Davidson, and Councillor Stephen Thompson is his substitute. Apologies from Caroline Stewart, who's the new representative for Further and Higher Education, and no substitute. Norma Austin-Hart, however, Helen Kerrin and Joan Dugan are both present today. Maureen Dowden from the housing sector, however, no substitute. Liz Manson is also unavailable to attend today, and Derek Crichton is planning to join us around 10:30 AM. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Our first item is the draft minute of our last meeting for approval, and our members' content that this is an accurate record. I'll take silence as assent. So, okay, sorry, did you hear that, or did it no? I didn't come off. Did it not come off again? Okay, Helen.
Oh, hello. Yes, I did just have a few points, if that's okay.
Okay.
On the minutes. Section 2.2.2. I'm just bringing it up myself. We said that we agreed that to future presentation on the regional economic strategy, this is page 7, a future presentation on the regional economic strategy and delivery plan work focusing on workforce planning issues would be helpful. Norma and myself raised this in November, and it was all about the alignment to the delivery of the RES, obviously particularly theme 1, the skilled and ambitious people, and the health and social care workforce plan, which I think is launching just now, and the recruitment element to the recovery plan. It just seems that we were kind of hoping that there might be a paper or something that demonstrates the kind of thinking that is demonstrating the joined up nature of this work, because it overlaps so heavily. So I guess from a minutes point of view, it was more that was a question rather than a point or
Yeah, through yourself, Leader. Helen, I believe it's scheduled for the next board meeting. I appreciate the timing. It perhaps isn't ideal, but it is on the forward plan.
Okay. All right, that's great. Thanks very much.
Yeah, if you look at item 10, it's on the June section of that. Right.
Okay. Well, that's good. Although the health and social care workforce plan is launching, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, we went to IJB yesterday, yes.
Yeah. Okay, lovely. I think, John, you maybe had a point around 5.1.
Okay, I think that the purpose actually of taking this at first is actually to degree its accuracy. So are these questions about the accuracy of the minute, or is it because you want to, you would like to ask for a report to come to a future meeting? Yeah, We use, if you like, the local authorities way of presenting minutes, which is just presenting decisions rather than, you know, what the questions that were asked. I know the health service does it slightly differently and tends to sort of in minute what questions were asked. As I say, the council method, if you like, is just to note the decisions that were taken. So the fact that somebody had asked a question wouldn't come in, but, you know, unless there had been a recommendation that an additional report came to another meeting. But would you like to request that we get a report at a future meeting? Stephen.
Thanks, Lida. Yeah, I mean, there's information that can be easily sourced in that through Mark Malloy, because I know that there's quite an extensive programme of training and upskilling for that project. So what I'll do, I'll get that out as soon as possible after the meeting to avoid delay, John, if that's okay.
Thanks. Okay, is there any further questions on the accuracy of the minute? So I'll take it that the minute is accurate, but that members would like a report on the counselling on schools to come to a further meeting, and that we note that we will get one on the rep at the June meeting. Or those of you who will be there at the June meeting will get one on the rep. Okay, can we move on now to the second item, which is the response and recovery update? We have Richard Greaves and Serena Dunlop here today to talk about the standing item, which includes an update on the recovery priority in relation to workforce challenges. Once we have considered the report, we will progress into today's breakout group session, which will focus on personal resilience, and Serena Dunlop will provide us with a brief overview beforehand. Helen Kerr will also provide us with a brief update on the Mental Health and Wellbeing Fund, which would, I think, she's intended to come after to bring to us after we come back from the workshops, and we've had the feedback from the workshops. So I'll hand over to Richard.
Thank you, Lida. Good morning, colleagues. So the report before you today gives you an update in terms of the recovery work that is ongoing across the multi-agency setting through the action plan that was agreed. As the leader has said, following the discussion that we had at the last Community Planning Partnership Board meeting, there has been subsequent discussions in regard to the workforce challenges. Colleagues will recall we had a discussion and members of the group highlighted key themes and key opportunities, key areas of work that you would like the working group to consider and to investigate further in advance of a multi-agency workforce summit that will then be taken forward in the summer of this year. Pleased to report, colleagues, that that subgroup has now met. The initial work has started in terms of scoping the detail of the workforce summit. I'll be very pleased, very happy to bring a more detailed update to the next Community Planning Board meeting that fleshes that out a wee bit in terms of exactly what areas we'll be focusing on across that whole agenda. But they very much reflect the challenges and issues and opportunities that were raised at the last meeting of the Community Planning Partnership Board and are included in the table in the report. Today then provides us with an opportunity, as agreed by the board, to look at the next area of focus for us in terms of personal resilience. As being one of the key themes that we agreed as a community planning partnership that we would have a deep dive session on, so to speak, in terms of these sessions. At that stage, Leader, I'd be happy just to hand over to Serena with your blessing, just to talk a little bit about the personal resilience element thereof, and obviously, as you say, we can then break into groups and have a wee bit more of a discussion and a deep dive on that topic. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thanks for that, Serena.
Thank you, Leader. Today's discussion is really, sorry, can you start the slides, please? Perfect, thank you. So it's just to give you a little bit of background around what we've done to date in relation to the recovery priorities for the Community Planning Partnership Board. Next slide, please. This outlines the 6 recovery priorities that we have agreed so far. As Richard outlined, we've already discussed and approached workforce challenges, and there will be a workforce summit in the summer. Today's discussion will be around personal resilience. Next slide, please. And that's really to focus us today on our thoughts and understanding of support to the health and wellbeing of communities in Dumfries and Galloway, taking a practical and inclusive approach to everything we do, focusing on tackling inequality and supporting vulnerable people across a broad range of services, partners and communities. Next slide, please. So the consideration of today's focus group is how can we improve personal resilience in Dumfries and Galloway? I would really like to focus in on how can we collaborate on this? What are we doing currently in a collaborative way? And what initiatives can we develop moving forward to help Dumfries and Galloway to recover? So the main question is how can we improve personal resilience in Dumfries and Galloway? Thank you, and I'll hand back to Leader if that's okay, and we'll go into our breakout groups. Thank you.
Okay, I hope it's not me who's responsible for doing that rather difficult task of assigning people. I'm sure somebody else more au fait will be doing that.
Yeah, Jennifer's going to split us into 2 groups, and it's going to be a 15-minute session, and then we'll come back, give some feedback, and myself and Kirsty will facilitate at both groups.
Thanks.
everybody back now? Yeah, Lida, through yourself, myself and Kirsty, we're going to feedback in terms of the kind of main points from the two groups if you want, but I'm conscious you got cut off at the end there. Just
That's okay, it's all right. That's all right. That's okay. Just press ahead.
Right, President. Okay, thank you. So the discussion we had, and I suppose we could have done with a few more 4 minutes. You never know how to judge these things, but it just really highlighted the complexity of the subject. The feeling was that there is so much activity on the ground, and partners are definitely contributing to it. But you know, is it joined up, or was still maybe a little bit silo mentality on that on the ground? In terms of being people-centred, we could be using third sector more to really reach into the heart of the communities. However, home teams was identified as a real potential opportunity to really get to the heart of those who need support most, capitalising on the new regional approach to health improvement, which in its early days, but that was definitely seen as an opportunity. There was talk about some kind of matrix mapping, really, that was still, you know, that understanding to make sure everyone knows what's out there. Again, mentoring and coaching came up. The use of the websites that's coming up, or apps, the DG locator map from third sector D&G. There's the DG doing more, trying to make sure that those are the go-to places for information for partners. Resources. The feeling was, you know, is that a key pressure, which it obviously is at the moment, which is limiting what everyone can do. Therefore, you know, we need to be as targeted as possible. We perhaps can't aim for the gold standard service all the time, but there's support networks out there that might help someone in some way and really make a big impact on their life. I think, you know, the evidence as well, just trying to capture, and, you know, what we are doing, is it really making that difference? Back to the how do we know? A good example of the community food providers and the impact that they've made, and just capturing that for the future. And again, being clear on who we're targeting, is it staff, communities, individuals? That was the final comment at the end there. So yeah, it was a fair discussion, and hopefully that summarised the main points from our group.
Thanks, Stephen. Now, I don't know whether it's Kirsty or Richard that's going to feedback from the other group.
Leader, if it's okay, I'll feedback from the group that was in the bridge. And Rich, that would be great if you could do the other online group, thanks. So we had a really good conversation around I suppose, the very positive and strong resilience that was shown around Dumfries and Galloway, particularly from our communities, and that we had a huge base, if you like, that were very resilient personally and at a sort of community level, but maybe some question marks around how that might be sustained as we maybe experience a bit of a dip, you know, post the excitement, if you like, dropping off, and then looking towards the recovery and the changes that will come with that, and perhaps an element of sadness at the kind of loss or changes that people have gone through over the last 2 years. Looking at, have we measured, quite a long discussion around measurement of resilience and how we measure those that were involved in any of the resilience activity, but also about how we measure going forward so that we have some sort of baseline around resilience, both personal and community. And perhaps some of that is about asking people who were involved and who have been impacted or affected by it, some type of kind of, you know, what can we learn from it? How did they get through it? What was the impacts for them? Recognising that it's been impacting on people very individually and very differently. Everyone's circumstances were affected differently. Some concerns around resilience going forward, just because of slow economic growth, inflation and the cost of living increases, and how that will exacerbate inequalities that we've already experienced. And how do people remain resilient in the light of that? And I think just coming back to, we probably came back to the measurement conversation again, about making sure that any efforts are targeted towards those who are most vulnerable, and how we collaborate on that, how we share information, both at a macro level, but also at a very individual level, once we've identified who the most vulnerable and those that experience greatest inequality are. Thanks, folks.
Thanks. So, Richard.
Thanks, Leader. So yeah, very similar topics and discussions. We recognise that it's a very wide and varied topic, but we tried to focus a little bit on the Scottish Government sort of key themes around some of the financial security and low income, and particularly well-being of children and young people. We felt that there's a potential to look at priority themes for Dumfries and Galloway within this agenda. And looking at what we have in place right now and looking to build on that and some of the success measures we've had and the way that we've worked and operated differently over the past 2 years. Clearly, there's a strong feeling and a strong desire that the multi-agency approach that we've adopted and enhanced that has worked particularly well, especially our engagement and involvement with our communities over and above and in addition to the sort of the multi-agency and constituted partners around the table. We felt that there needs to be better planning and a better aligning of resources, both internally and externally to organisations, and in a similar way to the leader's point, that's not just about money, but it's about other resources that we can brigade to better effect once we've identified what the key themes and opportunities are. A couple of key themes for us: mental health, particularly mental health in terms of our young people, which again features very heavily in some of the sort of national points that are raised within the document. And as Stephen said, we know we're doing well in Dumfries and Galloway, but again, in terms of joining up and making sure that we're maximising the opportunities of doing that, all of that work through a multi-agency approach and not duplicating resource, we think is pretty critical. Other external sort of impacts of rural poverty, rural transport infrastructure, digitisation, equitable access and housing were all issues that were raised that are critical around this agenda and are all interdependent factors in terms of what we should bring together in terms of a plan and a more collaborative and coordinated way of working moving forward within these agenda items. And finally, I think there's probably conversations to be had within the sort of multi-agency approach as to how we're going to sort of take a lead on this to ensure that there is greater collaboration and we can report this back through the Community Planning Partnership Board and with the help and support of the executive group in terms of just how we can focus those additional, well, those current resources and where there is a potential to identify and secure additional resource and really move forward on that agenda together. So yeah, good discussion and some key points and I think some focus for discussion moving forward. So thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for a lot of ideas from a short period of time from the three groups, I feel. Helen, I think you're going to take us through the Mental Health and Wellbeing Fund slides.
Yes, I'm actually going to hand over to my Vice Chair, John, but I will just share the slides right now.
So we're doing a very quick update to the Partnership Board today. The Dumfries and Galloway Community Mental Health and Wellbeing Fund, Round 1. Next slide, please. So a significant piece of work was put in place by Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway to look at this process. All the backroom operations had to be created and set up, and then working on how applications can be submitted and then scored, and panels were set up. The summary of results for the first round, and then we've been made aware by Scottish Government that a second round will become available over the next few months. Again, third sector Dumfries and Galloway will lead on this piece of work. The timeline, it was, as normally, was incredibly tight. You can see the timeline starting in November 21 with steering groups, lots of webinars for potential applicants, training workshops for the scoring panels and panel members, and the fund opened on the 30th of November. Applications were submitted and the score applications under 3,000 were done in December 21. Moving on to January, we can see that the deadline, the eligibility checks were done, the scoring panels, lessons learned from the work done previously. We see that the steering group meetings were held, grant letter offers were issued in February, extra funds announced by the government in February 22, and we can see that monitoring reports submitted to the Scottish Government, and we are currently preparing for work for round 2. Next slide, please. Just a slide to give an overview that in Dumfries and Galloway there was a funding allocation of £448,796 available, and you can see that under the 10k bracket there were 60%, and it just works down from 10 to 30 there were 20%, and the extra allocation that's going to be available is shown there on the screen of 875,908. Next slide, please. And really just giving a timeline for round 2, and it will be looking at capacity building, and that will start in May to July of this year, with funds committed by March of 23. And the next slide, please. So the panel, this piece of work was created, and we brought people in from officials from the council, the NHS College, Local Health Authority, and 2 others from the community to help with the scoring and steering groups. The Scottish Government announced that the NHS and third sector Dumfries and Galloway were the critical partners in this piece of work, and as you can see, the number of successful applicants will be delivering pieces of work right across the whole of Dumfries and Galloway to the communities that we all serve. 90 applications were received in total. 50 were above the quality threshold, and eventually all 50 were funded. I'm happy that if there was any observations or comments, we can take back. Any questions we will take back to Norma, who will respond on our behalf.
Thanks, John and Helen. Okay, there's a mic on somewhere, I think. Any questions? And if somebody's got a mic on, if they could switch it off, please. Any questions for John, or any questions that you want John to take back to Norma? Not getting any. Right. Sorry, Jane.
Well, it really wasn't. Say that's actually really quite impressively fast, and I'm very, very glad to see, John, that there was partnership working in terms of using the skills, other agencies who are used to scoring. So I mean that looks to me to be really good. I suppose what we'd be looking for in the future is just how effective this is being, and whether we're getting kind of maximum doubled up value from working in partnership or in tandem with other organisations who are trying to do the same sort of thing. But perhaps just a question of reporting back, that's all it would be.
Thanks, Jane. Valerie.
Thanks very much, Sean. I think it's a really great project, and actually through the third sector should get to those people who are most vulnerable and don't want to sort of engage with you know, the statutory sector. And I suppose it's just linking it back to that conversation about personal resilience. And I think there's some evaluation measures built into some of these programs. And I suppose it's like, because like at a macro population level, it's going to take a long time to probably see some of this. But I just wonder if we've got that resilience, a way of capturing that resilience measure in that contributes to the last conversation that we've had. But I'm guessing that there is.
There absolutely is, and certainly in the grant acceptance letters, there's a list of steps that each successful applicant has to do and report back. So yes, those mechanisms are in place, and hopefully at the end of this piece of work, there will be significant evidence to show the benefits that's happened to individuals across our communities in Dumfries and Galloway.
Thanks, and Stephen.
Thanks, Elaine. Yeah, apologies for any background noise. I'd actually had some feedback from community members. This related to something in Lochmaben, where this fund was sort of mentioned end of last year, and people seemed to be really unsure about how to access it or who was leading on it. So obviously, I mean, there's been a lot of successful outcomes in terms of awards, but is there a bit of learning to be done in terms of how people are accessing it? Because to be fair, there are a lot of familiar organisations and groups on there that a lot of people around the table will know about, which is no bad thing necessarily, but you do wonder if there are other people who maybe could have benefited from this who just didn't know how to or have the wherewithal to tap into it. And just a similar seeking assurance on just how this will be monitored in terms of impact. Thank you.
Helen. Excuse me, Helen.
Just to answer that, although obviously John could as well, but yes, I know it's a priority for Norma and the third sector Dumfries and Galloway team for that next time. They're really keen to get even more applications from the under 10k group to really try and get it out there, just little amounts making a big difference. So yeah, absolutely take that on board. I just wanted to make the point, because I don't know if it was completely clear, that that we had a funding allocation from the Scottish Government to administer, and then we got double the amount given out. And not every region in Scotland got that. So I think that's, if I could blow the staff's trumpet a little bit, I think that is a testament to the rigour of the process that third sector Dumfries and Galloway applied, despite the extremely compressed timescale, which, as you say, Stephen, it can be a barrier to some people. So yes, you know, and because of the process that was put in place, even though the amount of funding was suddenly doubled at short notice, we were able to preserve the integrity of the project. The quality benchmarking remained, and we know that every project that's been funded met our quality thresholds. So feeling quite confident in that respect.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you, Leader. And Helen, I think you're quite right to blow the trumpet of your colleagues. I think it's a fantastic achievement, and well done to all involved. I guess my question goes back to some of the comments that were made in the group that session we had earlier, which is just about collaboration and making sure that would put in place mechanisms whereby we can maximise this investment and ensure there's no duplication, but we enhance and develop either what's already there or identify gaps that's missing where these projects and these initiatives can obviously be maximised to greatest effect, and just how we're going to do that across the partnership in a multi-agency way across the region. Thank you.
Whether Helen or John wants to take that up.
Yes, no, absolutely. No, yeah, it's important that we do that, and the improved timeline for the second round will help us be able to do that better. I think because of the nature of the fund, I don't think we need to be duplication was a concern, but I think when you're looking at small amounts going out to grassroots communities, you're unlikely to be duplicating certainly statutory responsibilities. But it's certainly a concern and something that I know that Norma's got at the front of her mind.
seeing any other further questions. Just a question before we go on to the recommendations. In terms of the discussions that we had in the workshops, what are we going to do to take forward some of those ideas? Because that's not in the recommendations specifically, but I just wondered any views whether that should come back to a future meeting in terms of exploring some of those issues, or.
Leader, I'm happy to jump in, and Stephen can keep me right. I'm happy to work with Steve and Kirsty, and we'll collate all of the comments that were shared, bring them back together. And I think it is important, and in fact it's critical, that in the same way that we've had the workforce elements and the coordinated approach in terms of how we take that forward, particularly given the conversation we've just had with third sector colleagues as well, an opportunity to bring all of that back together and to present the full picture to the Community Planning Partnership Board in terms of the work that's happening across the area within this area of personal resilience, and building on the fantastic efforts across the piece that we've had in that multi-agency approach over the last 2 years. I think is a key piece of work, and a key piece of work that the Community Planning Partnership Board would want to see is being taken forward in the most integrated and coordinated and collaborative way. So happy to work with colleagues and make sure that's brought forward if that's what is required of the board leader.
It just seemed to me to be a shame to have a good discussion and then lose that, lose the content of it because we haven't got an action for that. So I think that would be do people agree that would be a good course of action going forward to ensure that we actually learn and apply what people have been talking about. Okay, so we move on to the recommendations, which is to note the progress since the last meeting, to consider the collaborative contributions, which we did at the workshops. And 4.3 is note the schedule of focus groups. I just suddenly had a panic then because I'm not quite sure where that is. Is that the items being referred to in 3.6? I just couldn't see a list of a schedule of focus groups particularly. Can anybody elucidate?
Would you like me to come in? There's a schedule attached as an appendix to the report, which outlines planned activity over the next scheduled community plan partnership boards.
Sorry, could you give me a paper? I don't know whether I've got a previous copy of the papers or something, but I don't seem to have that. But maybe you can give me maybe everybody else has got it. If it's a page number or whatever, I just don't seem to have that.
We can circulate again later. It's the schedule of the meetings under each of the topics that were agreed by the board that we should bring back for your consideration. So if you don't have that, apologies, and I'll make sure that's circulated with the minute later.
I think I maybe have an earlier copy of the papers, possibly. I've missed that. Anyway, if everybody else has got it, I'm sure they'll be happy to note that schedule. Just okay, that's lovely. Thank you. Now, if we go on to item 3, which is the Local Outcomes Improvement Plan Annual Report. This is the 4th annual LOIP Improvement Plan Annual Report. It should be noted that this year's plan has been delayed due to the late publication of a range of partners' performance information and other demands on the contributors. Obviously, pandemic is still affecting these. Other community planning partnerships have been in a similar position, with the submission of annual reports taking place out with the usual timetable. And Stephen's with us to speak to the report.
Thanks, Dieter. Yeah, it's very much a lighter touch report this time round, and it's really drawing some key performance information from published data now from the Equalities Partnership, Health and Social Care Annual Report, Poverty and Deprivation Research, and various business plans, including Police Scotland, Fire and Rescue, and the Local Child Poverty Action Plan. So Liz has suggested as well that if partners feel there's any obvious omissions, then we can take that on board either today or post the meeting where we can add that into the kind of final version. There's obviously real connections between the item we've just discussed and also the item to come in locality hubs and the midterm review, which, you know, it all connects in. So, you know, happy to leave it at that. There's a range of performance information and case studies that that partners, I'm sure they've had the chance to maybe glance at. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, it was inevitable. Well, because of illness, everything was late coming out. So this report was rather late coming out. So I'll take any questions or contributions people give now, but I think it would be a good idea, because it wasn't out until yesterday, to enable people to, you know, if they want to look at it with a bit more time, to enable people to come back with other contributions by email, possibly afterwards. I have got Helen followed by John. Sorry, Helen?
Sorry, 2 years in, still can't do it. No, I was going to say I have only just had a chance to look over it briefly because obviously it only came out at lunchtime. But and I'm aware it's retrospective more than exactly a year, isn't it? But so yeah. But something that stood out was the employment rate, declining employment rate. But I don't even know how useful it is to discuss it because it's a year out of date. But certainly we're having a big issue recruiting, and so I'm sort of, if the employment rate is going down but organisations can't find people, it's just the same conversation, isn't it? About the link between skills and employability and training.
I think also, given the time frame for this report, you know, was in the middle of COVID, that, you know, employment rate was decreasing because people were furloughed, or people, you know, people's work was ceasing because of it. But at the same time, I suppose people are less likely possibly to be coming forward. So yeah, I mean, it's a good point. It's a year out of date, and an awful lot has happened since then. John.
Yeah, I think it's just to make an observation. Yeah, with the lateness of the paper, I think it is the right way forward that we take it away and have time to read it properly and digest what it contains, and any feedback done by email.
Yeah, certainly it's difficult. I know the papers generally were quite late, and it's difficult to read everything in detail when you've got a lot of other things to do as well. So yeah, I think we agree to do that. And that's, you know, is there a time, you know, is there sort of a time frame where you need comments back, Stephen?
Well, it was perhaps suggested by the end of the month, but I'm thinking that we could you know, add the final report onto the June meeting, and then bring a final version back then, and that'll give everyone you know, due time to consider it and feedback.
I had actually written in the corner of my notes, defer to June. I just wondered whether, given if that's possible, I wasn't sure whether that was possible, that we would be in trouble because we hadn't submitted it in time and so on. But if it's possible to do that, I think that might be a good idea. Yeah. Sorry, I saw Jane's hand up briefly. Jane, did you want to?
No, it was just, I was just looking at very briefly at the declining numbers, the way that our position is declining, and we do appear to be going slightly the wrong way, with red numbers going between 2018-19, 2019-20 and 2020-21, sort of 2, 3 and 4 declining bits of our position. Could somebody just say very briefly, literally just in one word, what bits we should be looking at with respect to those declining figures? It's in the introduction, Leader.
Sorry, Stephen.
Yes, can somebody, I mean, you're referring to the appendix with the red, green, amber?
It's in the thing we were sent yesterday, the appendix, yes. And if you look in the introduction, there is a table which talks about the position for our 8 outcomes. And it's got improving, declining and no change. And the numbers of hours declining is going from 2 to 3 to 4 in the last 3 years. And I was just wondering if you could tell me in the briefest possible terms what we should be worried about in particular as a community planning partnership board.
Yeah, no, I would have to look at that in more detail for you and do a briefing on that one for you, Councillor Maitland, if that's okay.
Fine, forget it. It's now,
Sorry,
now is the leader.
Yeah, it was a slightly strange statement as well, because immediately above it, it says it was a significant improvement than last year, which it all seems to be a bit at odds with its increasing number of declining indicators. But yeah, I think it might be a bit more complex.
Yeah, Leader, what I can do, we said about doing the final version to the June meeting, so we can cover that detail in that report if that's okay.
That's great. Okay, so basically the report will come back. If people could get their comments in to Stephen, it presumably doesn't need to be by the end of the month, but it might be helpful, I suppose, if you could get it in fairly soon, and the report will come back to the June meeting for final consideration. Great. Okay. Item 4 is the Locality Hubs review. Locality Hubs have been highlighted as an exemplar of a successful partnership working during the pandemic. Helen, who's seeming to have to do a lot of work today, is going to take us through the lessons learned and propose next steps on behalf of Norma Hart. And Kirsty is also on hand to contribute. Helen.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, you've got the report in front of you. I'm just bringing that back up as well. Obviously, the point is to note that this was a note the report and the most important thing I think about the locality hubs, and it really speaks to everything we've been speaking about today, and the whole point of community planning partnership, of course, is that it was multi-agency groups. The locality hubs bringing together multi-agency groups chaired by Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway. So I think it really is a great example of partnership working and using the strengths, as we talked about in our breakout group, using the strengths of each of the sectors. So maybe using the third sector as a strategic partner to get down and get granular into the reaching all aspects of the community and where the need is greatest, and then using that to funnel back to the statutory bodies and the public agencies to kind of swing into action and do what they're good at. So so that's what we saw as definitely one of the positives of it. A review was carried out because it's obviously important to keep making sure these things are useful. But I think that the main points that I wanted to highlight from the report, which you'll have read, is that it was clear that people didn't want them to become talking shops. They were so effective, especially in the early stages of the pandemic, and it really was a new way of working. And I think it was generally agreed to be very, very effective. So we want to keep that. We don't want them to go back to being talking shops. We want them to keep making a difference on the ground. We want them to be relevant to the place-based agenda. Obviously, there's a lot of talk around place at the moment, and I do think that the locality hubs are absolutely aligned with that. So so that's an important thing to bear in mind. And also we're clear that the locality hubs shouldn't become deliverers. Again, sort of going back to some of the conversations from earlier, that's where you start to risk duplication. So it's all about connection and partnership working and making sure the resources are allocated in the best possible places at a really sort of local and hyper-local level. The next steps are to carry out a SWOT analysis of where we are right now, so that we can be really clear with all the stakeholders, so that we can be really clear what a 2-year action plan is going to look like for the locality hubs. But certainly I know I speak for myself and John and Norma when I say that we've been enormously pleased to chair these and enormously pleased to be part of it and see it as a bit of a step change in partnership working across the region, and really, really happy about that. So happy to take any comments or questions.
Thanks, Helen. Any questions, comments for Helen? I think there's a general acknowledgement that they have been extremely successful. I think everybody's so impressed they're not asking questions. Okay, are we happy to note the content of the report and the development of the locality hubs? And I'm sure people are looking forward to hearing more about their progress. And indeed, your aspiration that they don't return to being talking shops, I think, is shared by everyone. Okay. Item 5 is the midterm review of the Dumfries and Galloway Local Outcomes Improvement Plan and Locality Plan. We've reached the midpoint of our existing LOIP and locality plans, and it was previously agreed that there would be a review at the midway point. It seems timely given that everything that has happened over the last 2 years in particular. This matter was considered at the executive group on the 23rd of February, and the suggestions from CPEG members have been incorporated into this report. And Stephen's having to work hard this way today as well. Stephen, England and Kirsty are here. Stephen.
No, thanks, Leader. Yeah, so yeah, we're at this midway point, which seems timely given everything that's happened over the last 2 years in particular, and it's a poignant point to undertake a review. The feeling when we took the report to the executive group was acknowledging the pressures that partners are under and continue to be under, and rather than undertaking a full review which would have a drain and pressure on resources, that we would definitely take a lighter touch approach to it and rather set up a formal development group. I would take a lead and work with partners on an ad hoc basis, looking at desktop research and really trying to maybe work and focus down on 2 or 3 key priorities. So that was the key message from the executive group, and that's what's been proposed as part of the review. So happy to take any questions or observations on that. Thank you.
Okay, members, any questions, observations? Are you content with the approach that's being suggested by CPEG? Helen.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a very sensible approach in the current context. It was something actually that Norma asked me to highlight because I think she highlighted it before, but it perhaps hasn't yet been reflected in the papers. It's the relationship between the section 3.2 in the in your paper, Stephen, about the agreement of equality, any changes to the LOIP outcomes. Possible changes to the LOIP outcomes. Here we go. This review will therefore give the partnership the opportunity to consider changes to the outcomes or key groups. And then in the when we were discussing in the recovery plan in a previous one, that mentions an audit in relation to national outcomes. And it just seems like there's a risk that we could end up with 2 groups of people doing a very, very similar audit / review of outcomes with respect to things. So it was just to clarify how we were going to make sure we didn't have 2 completely different groups working on what is effectively the same output.
No, thanks, Helen. It's an important point. No, I'll make sure behind the scenes we're joined up in that, and it's one single effort, and it's not duplicating.
Yes, I wonder if and including it as a bullet point in the recovery plan might make that link really obvious.
That's a helpful suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think there's a general agreement. This is a good approach. I think Helen makes an important point there, though, that we don't want lots of people doing basically the same thing. So I think that will be actioned. So I think we've considered and commented on the proposed approach. I don't think anybody else has any other comments on that, so we'll move on. And our next item is the Climate Emergency Declaration Baselines Emissions Inventory Update. Got Simon Fieldhouse, not Stephen again, Simon Fieldhouse and Sarah Farrell are here to speak to the report, which focuses on providing an insight into the current emissions data from 2018 and 2019 for both the council and the region, and to highlight the work undertaken on the citizens panel. I just think it's unfortunate that emissions data always seems to be so out of date, really, that a lot's happened. 2020 and 21 could be very different because of COVID. So we're looking at something quite different. But anyway, Stephen, Simon and Sarah, do you wish to take us through the report?
Aye, thank you, Chair. I'll just run through a few key bits and pieces. Obviously, there have been, within the report, we've obviously noted that there have been slight changes to the methodology that's been used to calculate the baseline. Some of the figures and the methodology from base has meant obviously that some of the things that were included that were sort of been acting as a sink are now acting as emissions. And obviously sort of key points probably to pull together from this is obviously that despite those figures, we've actually seen a region-wide reduction of 3% of our baseline from compared to sort of the 2018 sort of revised figures, which is positive. Notably in that is obviously the waste reduction figures through the recycling that's been undertaken. And for that period of time, obviously that was just focused predominantly in the west of the region around the Wigtonshire, given obviously the trial work that went on there. So we're anticipating that will continue given the sort of the wider rollout that we've seen in recent months. Obviously, there is also noticeable sort of reductions in agricultural emissions and also sort of our industrial emissions that are sort of highlighted within the tables within the report. I will bring Sarah Farrell in now just to have a quick chat about the citizens panel, then happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Simon.
Thank you. The citizens panel has been developing over the past few months. We have 6 place-based areas that we're looking at, and it is moving very well. We have 2 of the areas that are moving slightly quicker than the others, and they have been contacted by the supplier that have chosen their the citizens within that area, and they will be meeting within the next week or 2. I'm not sure of the exact date as yet, but we hope to clarify that. It certainly will be by the end of this month. So that you know the enthusiasm and support for the citizens panel across the region is really encouraging. The areas that the provider have been speaking to are really keen, really engaged, and we hope to get some fantastic feedback from these places on the strategic plan that we've produced and taken to the areas. Thanks.
Thanks. Can I invite comments, questions? If I could ask a technical question. Oh yes, Nick has put a question in the chat function saying he doesn't understand the percentage on table 1 and how is 297 to 282 a drop of 4%. He's referred to table on page 69 in my notes. It says residential. Said it was 297 and then it was 294 and then it was 282. And the change, that is still odd actually. The percentage change from 2018 to 2019 is 4.
My apologies, Chair. We'll double check those figures. I think obviously we've had obviously due to the revised methodology, we've obviously included revised figures for 2018 and then obviously the figures for 2019, but we'll just double check to make sure that those are fine. And obviously if there's any changes, we'll come back and obviously let the group know.
Okay, what's got Jane wanting to speak?
Thank you very much, Elaine. I have to say that you look at this, it's agriculture that we've got in our region, and we are a very rural area. We are absolutely dependent upon that agriculture doing well. Now, I have to advise you all that already through planning, agriculture, particularly big heavy vehicles, are demonized in the rural villages. I mean, they detest the big things going up in agriculture, and I'm very concerned that I think the word demonized is right actually, that that people will really get less and less understanding of the importance of that particular sector to our economy. Now, this is a community planning board. How do we make sure looking at that citizens panel, which has got a huge gap in the South Estuary. There is nothing down there in the southern area, South Estuary, and that is where some vast percentage of the milk production of Scotland is actually located. And probably you'll find that there are thousands of animals housed in big sheds down there, and there's a kind of gap there where arguably we don't get the citizens getting a chance to speak directly to the agricultural sector, and I'm a bit concerned about how that will be managed. So could I have some assistance on that? I think there's a worry there.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair, through yourself. Yeah, just to try and address those concerns from Councillor Maitland. Obviously, we have the 6 pilot areas that Sarah's talked about. They're going to be running to give us obviously the methodology, the engagement route that we need to be looking at. We're then planning to set up obviously further citizens panels across the region to ensure that we can obviously capture those thoughts, that input, and ensure obviously that we take on board sort of comments and concerns from local residents. In relation to the agricultural sector, it's one of the key things that we're very aware of in terms of our economic profile, that agriculture plays a huge role to support local communities and businesses across the region. We've had significant engagement with the NFUS and also Scottish Land and Estates within the region to ensure obviously that they are linking in and supporting, and obviously we've got some fantastic opportunities and ideas in the pipeline through things like the Borderlands, the the Dairy Nexus project, to look at obviously how we can look at lowering sort of emissions and obviously supporting them to look at transitioning towards a low carbon sort of future. So it is something we're aware of and we're prioritising, and we're trying to obviously look at this over the next couple of years in line obviously with our climate emergency declaration.
Thanks, Simon. Can I just ask, I suppose, a technical question, really? Why is grassland becoming an emitter rather than a sink? I would have thought that something green which was growing would be of assistance in terms of reducing carbon. What's actually, is that farmed grassland or just grass in particular, that in general that has now been classified as being an emitter?
Aye, thanks, Chair. So obviously, sort of, they're looking at obviously how carbon is trapped within the soil and obviously growing patterns. So my understanding is obviously is that grasslands at this moment in time was considered as a net sort of sink previously, but is now moving more towards becoming a net emitter due to obviously sort of how that land is managed. So there are challenges for us moving ahead in terms of how we can obviously try and look at best practice, and I think part of that sometimes is the opportunity for no-dig agriculture, where things are slightly sort of undertaken on a slightly different level, that we have obviously emission from the soil beneath the sort of the ground when we've obviously got things ploughed, or sort of looking obviously at some of the land management activity that we've got.
Thanks. So just a puzzle to be able to whether they should dig up the lawn if it's actually now contributing to increasing emissions rather than helping. But John Dugan.
Thank you, Elaine. I'm just interested in the question about the citizens panels and how recruitment to these are being made for the various parts of the region, to making sure that we get a good cross-section of our communities on these said panels, to make sure that we're able to represent everyone's voice and sections. I'm just interested in learning a little bit more about the recruitment to these.
Lovely, thanks, John. If I could bring Sarah in, who's been dealing obviously with the citizens panel, to provide an answer for that one.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, the citizens panel have lots of experience of developing this type of place-based approach. They have various criteria as to the different demographic, but that is not fixed on each place, because we understand that each place is quite different, so that they do have a sort of baseline, if you like, of demographic that they will be engaging with, and will also bring in sectors within each area to make sure that no one is missed. Does that suffice, or do you want more? I can get you further detail on that if you want it.
Yeah, that would be very interesting if you could. Thank you.
How do you identify people in terms of the people who want to, before you actually go through the analysis as to whether it's representative or not? How are you identifying who might be interested in coming onto the panel?
Yeah, the providers actually visited each of the areas, and what we've tried to do is contact people who wouldn't normally engage, to try and get that full engagement. So that they've actually visited the areas, they've gone in and visited local businesses, you know, went in and had a discussion with the local hairdressers, for example, and what type of people are in that area, and you know, tried to get a real good feel for each area individually, in the anticipation that they wouldn't be missing any sector. We can't guarantee, obviously, that's not going to happen, but there is a lot of work going on the ground to cover as much as we possibly can. If there is something identified somewhere, we will certainly raise that and make sure that is included. If I could just add a little bit as well about the Councillor Maitland's concern about including agriculture, just to add that there is a climate emergency regional stakeholders network which I'm developing at the moment, and that in itself again should cover all sectors. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Any further questions? Helen.
Hello, it was just a comment as a resident, really. I think it's got lost in the chat, just to say that the really amazing reduction in waste is astonishing and really good to see. And I think it's a really good example of where when we as a region lean in and make really big and presumably expensive and difficult changes to our infrastructure, it pays off. You know, so I just wanted to commend everybody for that. It's really good to see.
Thanks, and that's actually before we rolled it out to most of Dumfries and Galloway. So I'm anticipating we'll see an even more significant reduction in, you know, over the next couple of years, particularly since we brought in the food waste and so on.
Fabulous.
Okay. Right. If no more questions, we've been asked to note the activity and commission. To note the changes to the methodology and assumptions, to note the baseline figures, and to note the activity and commission undertaken to develop a citizens panel. I'm sure there will be further reports on the progress of these. So thank you. Okay, the next item is the digital strategies and skills update. Let me just get my papers. Progressed. There we go. Anyway, this report provides us with an update on the strategic digital collaboration work that is taking place across the community planning partners, with a particular focus on digital skills. So we've got Stephen, Phil Storier and Leslie Broadwood are here to speak to the report, and I think Helen is going to share with us a presentation on the digital exclusion research project, which the third sector, Dumfries and Galloway, have been leading on, but I'll hand over to Stephen first.
Okay, thanks, Leader. Yeah, so this project's been ongoing for about 5 or 6 months as agreed through the community planning partners. The council and college have taken a bit of a lead working with other partners to really scope out the strategic landscape with regard to digital skills, which has been pretty complex, but we're now in a really good place, and particularly colleague Leslie, who's on the call, has done some really great research with a number of groups and partners to really get to the detail of what the digital skills gap is across our region. And some of that information is contained within Appendix 2, and Leslie's going to cover that in a little bit more detail. And we've also got an update on the Digital Skills Hub, following on from a report previously. And again, Leslie or Phil Storier, if he's on the call, might be able to help out there as well. Joanna Campbell was due to attend along with myself, but she was unable to make it, and she just wanted to put her apologies in there. So what the work has done as well, it's brought to light that not one partner really knows who's all operating in the digital skills landscape across the region, and particularly the third sector groups and organisations that are on the ground, and that's really important. So the work's helped bring that together, and we've identified about 20 local providers who are either providing digital skills on an ongoing basis or on a temporary basis through funding. And just before Christmas, the Scottish Government launched an Adult Learning Recovery Fund, which was targeted and administered through third sector Dumfries and Galloway. And again, there's around 10 providers who were successful in that across the region, and their projects were specifically for digital skills, but really targeted for those that are most vulnerable across our region. So some of those programmes have only just commenced or about to commence. There was an extension on there, so we're trying to get all that information together, but things are really progressing well, with the ambition to really produce a very focused digital skills strategy and an action plan which will help address the gaps that have been identified through this project. So I'm just going to hand over to Leslie, and then we can take questions, and then Emma Bowden from Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway is going to share a presentation with us on the digital exclusion research programme, which Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway have led on. So if it's okay through yourself, Chair, if we can bring Leslie in, thank you.
Thank you. Apologies, Emma, I hadn't changed my notes there.
Hello all, and thank you very much for inviting me to the Community Planning Partnership Board this morning to provide some further detail on the digital skills strategy and research piece of work that we've been undertaking. And this has very much been supported by partners from within the Community Planning Partnership and other sector partners too. For instance, DWP and South of Scotland, Skills Development Scotland and other partners. But just to identify that it's been really interesting to focus on for this piece of research has been to focus on the public sector provision of digital skills for employees and also for individuals across the region. We found the last year a digital survey was produced by the South of Scotland Enterprise, which identified the digital skills gaps for private businesses. And what we found was from that major report that was released last year, that no public sector businesses, organisations rather, responded to that major survey. So we had no idea in terms of research findings what the digital skills gaps were from the public sector. So that's where this research has started. From the paper that you've all received, you can see that a number of organisations from the public sector have been engaged in conversations around their digital skills gaps for their employees. And what we have found from that is that the major, in terms of the digital skills provision, public sector bodies do provide basic provision around email and how to use MS Office and cybersecurity, upskilling, and also in terms of how to use their own software systems in-house. But over and above all of those particular elements, the provision really does vary quite significantly. And some organisations in the public sector across Dumfries and Galloway believe that their employees have the appropriate skills to undertake their work in terms of digital skills. So the way in which those particular organisations would offer digital skills upskilling is if individuals, employees actually come through a PDR process and articulate that they have skills requests, and those are considered on demand. However, other organisations provide digital skills to their employees based on their particular role or rank within their organisation, which really identifies what kind of IT software systems that they need to utilise. So it's very much more of a structured offer. We also find within the research that we've undertaken that certain national organisations such as Police Scotland and the Department for Work and Pensions obviously have national IT service provision. So this isn't provided, upskilling in digital isn't provided at a local D&G level. So that is very much at a national level, and that has more potential restrictions on who can access digital upskilling. As you can see from the paper that was provided to you all, the biggest, most significant barrier to upskilling was time, particularly within the NHS and within the education sector. These are very dynamic workforces, very time constrained, and therefore the time available to upskill in digital is really at a premium. So really moving forward as CPP partners and other sector partners coming together to address skills needs within the region, we need to be mindful about how we can provide digital skills upskilling in a way which is going to cater for those who really have very little time at hand. I don't know whether there's anything other that I should add at this point, unless you have any particular questions, or if you like some further details on what the research has stated.
Okay, I'll hand over to people for questions if you've got anything on the report. I can see a hand up. It's Colin Cook. Colin.
It is. Can you? Sorry about that. So I'm from the Scottish Government, an observer on this programme. There are a number of either established national initiatives or growing, about to come national initiatives. The Connecting Scotland programme around digital inclusion, probably more appropriate to the next presentation. There are commitments in the government's new economic strategy around schools trying to embed digital training in more effective ways within schools, for example, and there's programs of work around digital uptake in small businesses and the work the Business Gateway does. I mean, is the approach in Dumfries and Galloway embedded within that national approach, or is it separate? And if it isn't, if I can help draw some of those links, please contact me afterwards, and I'll make sure that we do that.
What I would say is that our work is very much embedded. We are very much working with all of our partners across not just Dumfries and Galloway, but also out with the region too. So we are very much aware of Connecting Scotland. We're very much aware of the activities that are being undertaken at a national level. And that's why it's so pivotal that we all work together, not to be able to duplicate what is already happening. But I think it's also worth mentioning that potentially some of the national provision that is available isn't potentially always as targeted as maybe it needs to be, and there's possibly one example of that which I could explain to you briefly, and that is around sole traders and their ability to access the kind of support to help them grow their businesses across rural environments such as Dumfries and Galloway. The issue there is really down to confidence, and really down to the fact that they don't understand or see the value of digital in any way, shape or form. So even though they know that there is support from Business Gateway and they know the brand, they've heard of it, they have no desire or inclination to approach Business Gateway with any kind of issues around digital. And the confidence thing is really key as well, because even if they do get support, one-to-one support around maybe how to use Excel to be able to input data and be able to help them calculate their tax returns, for instance, if they're left after a session and not supported to be able to work through that particular activity, they find that they're up against significant issues with how to understand how to do it, and lose the confidence, and then decide it's all too difficult and stop doing it. So I think from the conversations that I've had with local small businesses, and also with Business Gateway as well, and also with the South of Scotland Enterprise, is that there is a piece of work that is over and above national provision for sole traders in a rural environment, obviously with connectivity issues as well. So I think, there are clear pockets, and that's one example of where our national activities need to be amended or tailored to meet the specific needs within the region. I hope that helps.
Thanks. if we have no further questions, we could proceed to Emma's presentation on digital exclusion research. Emma.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for that update as well, Stephen. I'm just going to bring up my presentation. Can that be seen okay? Can everyone see the presentation okay there? Yeah.
Yep, I can see it.
Brilliant, thank you. So today I'm just going to follow on from the update that Stephen's just provided, which links in very closely to the work that Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway are currently doing, which is predominantly around the Digital Inclusion Research Project of 2021-2022, and to provide an update to the board today about the progression of the project to date. I had a short presentation which will outline the schedule and project rollout to date and the time frame. I'm going to talk briefly about the wider strategic incorporation within the project. I'm going to briefly talk about the project numbers and statistics to date. And we'll also mention the next steps and progression of digital inclusion with the third sector. So the Digital Inclusion Primary Research Project was first established way back in July 2021. It was after a bit of initial scoping, which realised that although there was a large amount of national and Scottish data on digital exclusion, there was a severe lack of regional level research and hard figures to find out the extent of the issue. And not only that, but there was also a severe lack of post-COVID data as well. I'm sure we'll all be very aware that post-COVID, COVID has pushed things very much in a digital sense, and there's actually a lack of specific research looking at the investigation and the impact that has had on the kind of digital shift. So I'm going to provide a brief update as to where the project is at. So obviously the project was initiated back in July 2021. And all these milestones were achieved by the start of August 2021, which was the establishment of a project reference group, which is composed of 14 different third sector organisations across Dumfries and Galloway, which are acting as a steering and advisory group on the research project. There was the appointment of myself as the Digital Inclusion Project Officer, as the lead project manager of the project. The project reference group agreed the terms of reference, and connections were made with IRIS, who are the Institute of Research and Innovation in Social Services, who have acted as a research guidance and advisory body for the project. Following on from that, by the start of November 2021, we had finalised a project questionnaire on Microsoft Forms. I appreciate that creating a digital exclusion questionnaire online on Microsoft Forms might sound a bit counterproductive, but that Microsoft Forms questionnaire has been designed to collect data in a multitude of ways, including in-person questionnaire completion, telephone consultation, paper copies then inputted online. So there's a variety of data collection methods within that. And the questionnaire was tested internally by Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway staff. Following on from that, by the end of November, we completed what was called an interviewer's pack, which was a pack to assist participating third sector organisations who were conducting this data gathering on our behalf with their service users, and that was to support them with the data gathering process. We also initiated and completed 2 project pilots, which included training for the 2 participating pilot organisations. And after the completion of the project pilots, a wide expression of interest initial email was sent out inviting organisations who had a base in Dumfries and Galloway to partake in the data gathering aspect of the research project. By the end of December, we'd held 2 further information webinars for potentially interested organisations, explaining a bit more about the project. Application forms. An online application form system was set up and established, and organisations that were keen to partake submitted an application form to partake in the data gathering process. The Microsoft Forms questionnaire was then edited based on the pilot and staff feedback as well. By the middle of February, 44 training sessions had been delivered, so each participating organisation across the region nominates one staff member to come along to a training session held by ourselves, which provides a bit more information about the project and how to data gather effectively. A press release for the project was recently distributed. You may have seen that in the Galloway News or on the Third Sector Dumfries and Galloway website recently. A lessons learnt and evaluation project report has been produced, noting all the key evaluation lessons to date. And we're now 1 month into data gathering. So those third sector organisations and some public sector organisations as well are now 1 month into that data gathering process. Then by the end of March, which is fast approaching, data gathering will close. Our initial target is 300+ questionnaire responses submitted by service users of these participating organisations. So I'll talk a bit about the strategic incorporation that's gone on, because obviously there's a large amount of digital work going on within the region. So this third sector Dumfries and Galloway research will form the basis of our strategic approach to digital exclusion by third sector organisations. And it will inform the wider digital skills strategy currently being developed by others, such as Dumfries and Galloway and Scottish Borders Colleges, Dumfries and Galloway Council, the Regional Economic Strategy, which has a large emphasis on digital infrastructure, and the Borderlands Digital Programme as well. So there's a wide amount of strategic incorporation going on within the project. So to look at the numbers and statistics to date, we've received 68 initial expression of interest from organisations across the region. From that, 42 application forms were submitted online from organisations keen to partake in the research. From that, 39 organisations attended their training session that was provided by ourselves. And then from that, each organisation that partakes must also sign a research agreement to protect their service users and outline confidentiality and other project and data gathering criteria. And then from that, we have 30 organisations that are currently up and going with their data gathering with their service users. And as of today, we have 537 questionnaire responses, and it's a lengthy questionnaire, so that's well above our initial 300 target. We're hopeful that the end numbers may look closer to 1,000, which will provide us a very large and extensive data pool about digital inclusion and informing that wider digital picture about the region. So just to kind of outline the progression cycle and kind of next steps for the project. So obviously the initiation is the start of data gathering on digital inclusion in Dumfries and Galloway. It's very Dumfries and Galloway based. It's specific for the region via the Microsoft Forms questionnaire. We want to complete and interpret all our data analysis. Each participating organisation is also going to be provided back with an anonymised and what we're calling usable actionable data report, which provides them anonymised information but about their service users so that they can use this to source further funding, provide further digital inclusion activities, and identify any actions they want to take from it. We're then going to produce our end project report, which highlights all the key discoveries and findings from that data. We then hope to present the project findings to relevant parties. And then based on the needs identified from the research, we're hoping that this will stem the creation of digital inclusion training, events and funding based on that identified need. Anyone have any questions at all?
Any questions, comments? Okay. I think if everybody's Stephen, are you going to?
Yeah, no, thanks, Lisa. No, it's just to thank Emma for her work on this project, and it's had a really high uptake so far. So I think that really rich data and information we're going to get out of that could be really key going forward in terms of addressing the digital gap on the ground. So yeah, no, it's just to pass on my thanks to Emma, and we're all working together for the same outcome.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Yeah, and thanks, Emma, for your presentation. If there aren't any questions on that, I think we have considered the progress updates, and we did receive a presentation, so I think that's the issues and the recommendations dealt with. If we could go on now to the key strategies and plan updates. This is the usual update on the plans and strategies that contribute to the local outcomes improvement plan. And as usual, I go through them in order to allow members the opportunity to comment or ask questions. So the first one is the Children's Services Plan. Any questions? Or comments, of course, because they would be taken back to Jim. Or if not, if we could move on to the Community Justice Outcome Improvement Plan. Anything on that? The Community Learning and Development Partner Strategic Plan. The Employability and Skills Plan. Health and Social Care Strategic Plan. Yes, Jane.
No, nothing particularly to add, Elaine, except that you and I were both there yesterday when I think 3 big steps were taken by the IJB, getting its strategic commissioning plan, its workforce development plan, and its performance framework, all agreed at the IJB yesterday, which are 3 big chunks of work, and I feel it's a major step forward. So thank you for that, and I just want to make that point.
Yeah, yes, there's certainly a lot of work behind those plans, a lot of consultation and so on. So yeah, good to see those going, actually getting through the board. Okay, the next one is the Local Child Poverty Action Plan. And the Local Development Plan. The Local Housing Strategy. The Poverty and Inequality Strategy. The Regional Transport Strategy. And finally, the South of Scotland Regional Economic Strategy, which obviously, as you'll be aware, is a fairly new development, and that the action plan has just been developed. If there are no comments or questions on all of those, we then move on to the business briefing. Today's business briefing includes updates on place planning, population 155, and the suicide prevention strategy. Appendix 3 contains the response submitted to the Scottish Government in relation to the National Strategy consultation, which was kindly coordinated by Claire Thirlwall. And Stephen and Jamie Ferguson are here to speak to the report. Stephen.
Thanks, Leader. Sorry, I just noticed there as well that Councillor Maitland had her hand up, and so did Helen Kerrin, but it was maybe in relation to the previous item.
Yeah, hang on. I didn't see Helen's hand at all, actually. I see Jane's. I thought it was a legacy. I didn't see Helen's hand being up. Helen, was your hand up?
Sorry, yes, sorry, Leader. It was just a comment, and I'm only speaking for myself here, but certainly having I didn't have time to read all those reports. I didn't have time to read 144 pages in a day and a half. So apology. I feel that it's must be difficult for the people who submit the reports to have them whiz through like that with no comment passed. So I guess I'm sitting here feeling guilty, but I feel like to make, you know, just as a point, that the board would work better if we could all give it the due consideration that it deserves.
No, I agree with you. The papers were out too late. I mean, I didn't have time to read them in detail either. They were, I mean, it couldn't be helped this time because a member of staff was off sick. But it is too late. People haven't got the time to read these reports in detail in a couple of days. It's just not feasible for any of us.
It's a shame for the people who submit them, I think.
I think the point's taken. It's maybe something that needs to be looked at actually in terms of the future meetings of the partnership, that people really do need to get their reports a bit earlier so they have time to read them. Stephen.
Yeah, Leader, no, I absolutely, you know, agree that the papers were out too late this time, and apologies for that. What we'll be looking at is the forward schedule to bring some of the deadline for submissions forward to allow us more time to get the papers together and get them out much earlier to the board, so there is enough time to look at them properly, because there's so much information in there. So it's definitely been acknowledged, and apologies for that.
Thanks, Stephen. Okay, if we go now to the business briefing, and we've got Stephen and Jamie. Stephen, do you?
Yeah, so it's brief updates on where we are. I think Jamie's quite keen to give an update on the place planning. So we'll maybe start there first, if that's okay.
That's fine. Jamie.
Quite happy to do that through you, Chair. Yeah, the place planning partnership still fairly recent. There was a report to the November meeting of this grouping. Place planning partnership, we have a range of partners who have an interest in work around place. And the purpose of the place planning partnership is to bring those partners together, really to get some coherence around how we do things with communities. Communities either who are developing their place plans, perhaps through borderlands, or who wish to develop place plans. You'll be aware that there is a push, in fact, regulations through Scottish Government in terms of the Planning Act, that place plans are increasingly recognised within local development plans. Council itself is working on the process for that, how these plans will be registered and included in local development plans. So partners, I think it's a real opportunity for community planning in terms of bringing partners together around the needs of communities, which is really at the core of community planning. And that element of how partners plan with communities, I think, is absolutely vital. Place plans, as you'll know, if you've ever had a look at the place standard, are around essentially questions that communities ask of themselves around their transport, around their health, around their employability, their green space, their opportunities for young people, their opportunities for play. So naturally, by communities developing those kind of coherent plans, it brings together, I think, the activities of all of the partners, whether it's NHS, whether it's community safety, how safety people feel in their communities, whether it's planners and green space, that whole sort of thing. So that forms the basis of the place planning partnership. We've been engaged as a partnership in training around place, increasingly looking at training around place. We're looking at case studies of partnerships that have worked in place. We're working with other local authorities, looking at their approaches, their community planning approaches to place. And also we're mapping with communities how many place plans or community plans we have at the moment. The answer to that across Dumfries and Galloway is around 30 plans, whether they're community plans or whether they're strictly place plans. We're also looking at the kind of offer to communities, what offer we can have to communities around developing their place plans, and looking increasingly at kind of the web presence that we can put out to communities in terms of advice and support. So I'll stop there, Leader, and happy to take any questions.
Certainly good to hear that there's so many place plans around, because a lot of external funding is based around place planning now. So in order to be able to get into those funding streams. If communities already have those in progress, they're better placed, I think.
Increasingly, Chair, they're better placed to take all sorts of opportunities, to uptake all sorts of opportunities. And as I say, there's a variety of reasons for communities wanting to engage in place plans. Some of them because they want to register those plans and influence the local development plans. Some of them because they're borderlands groupings and they're seeking funding. Some of them because they know that funders increasingly are looking towards place plans. And I think in terms of understanding what's needed in communities, that whole self-reflective bit around communities, some of them purely for that sort of approach.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you, Elaine. What I was going to ask, Jamie, is do we have a clear structure, a community planning structure with our partners, thinking about the NHS in particular, obviously, as being one of the big issues? Do we have a structure whereby local groups can say to the NHS, please assist us in commenting upon what our communities need? Is there an established path for communities to do that on a community planning basis?
Good question. We're fairly new in this process. I would say, Jen, we're just developing the process, and I know that in tandem with us, that Northern Third Sector D&G are looking at the kind of evolution of the locality hubs. The locality hubs, when they're up and functioning to their full potential, I think allow that opportunity for those with local knowledge of communities to direct their priorities and direct their efforts towards that sort of support. So I don't want to, preempt third sector in this, but I think there's a huge opportunity within that. What we'll look at some of the learning that we've been talking about from other kind of community empowerment activities is that our communities value that one point of contact for these things. So that's what we're looking towards. There may be a conduit into this, and usually that's a trusted figure within communities that they will approach, and we'll certainly put on our website when we've kind of got our act together on that there is that one point of contact, so that communities will have one way in, whether it's virtual or through a local contact. And then I think the kind of proposal is that will then go to the hubs for their consideration and joint working at local level. Hope that answers.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Valerie.
Thanks, Jamie. I suppose I'm just thinking about this sort of home team model as well, and how that connects with place and the locality hubs. And I suppose I'm just thinking home team, place partnerships, locality hub. How does it all connect and join together, isn't it?
Yeah, it's spot on. I'm very aware, Valerie, that things like the place standard tool, right? They didn't develop in a vacuum. They developed around health. They were developed by Health NHS, and they were developed on the basis that people's life opportunities and people's longevity actually is very much rooted in where and how they live, right? And that some of those upstream preventative methods, if you like, in terms of public health, are very much dependent on people's place. I mean, a lot of it emerged from some of the studies around, places like Glasgow, where in Easterhouse, if you're a guy, your life expectancy, I think, was sitting about 63 at the time. And if you're up the road in Mulgai or wherever, your life expectancy's up in the 80s, stark, not only around place, but around place and culture. So we've now got Joe Capella from the kind of home teams version of things as they develop, who will be working with us in the partnership. Yeah, we've also got John Howie from Public Health Scotland, who has been doing some training with the partnership. And, you know, we're very keen because when communities, and increasingly we do have communities coming to us looking to putting themselves forward really to be pilots around this kind of joined up approach. And we're trying to be quite careful that we get a variety of different communities, you know, socioeconomically and everything else. But when communities are asking these questions, their needs incorporate everything, you know, in the parts they're looking at. It's around transport, it's around employability, it's around health, and it's around opportunities. So NHS, I see very much, Val, and I'm glad you're asking it, really at the core of that.
Thanks, but I think you've hit the nail on the head, though. It's the partnership, you know, that makes the difference, because all the things that influence the health are all those things. So, but it's really great that we're embedded to be part of that.
Absolutely, Val, and where, you know, you try and manage expectation around these things and point out to communities that it's really for them to take their plans forward. It's not for the council or others. But at different stages, depending on what that plan looks like, every community has strengths, but it also has huge areas for development. And I think that's where the partners come in, just in terms of what's getting thrown up through those plans. Because it's one thing to have a plan, it's another thing to actually, you know, put an action plan in place to do something about it. No, I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I invite any further questions on the reports? Okay, so we were being just being asked to note the position of the issues in the report. And the final item is the Community Planning Partnership Board Forward Programme, which is item 10 on page, on my 144. You'll see that joint meetings with the Youth Council actually scheduled for June and September, but I presume it will be either June or September rather than both. I just wondered, in terms of the counselling school stuff, whether that could maybe go to that meeting with the Youth Council. It would seem a reasonable place for it to go. I also see in the June one the presentation of the Regional Economic Strategy and Delivery Plan is scheduled to go to the June meeting, though presumably that's if it's not the joint meeting with the Youth Council. Do you, Stephen, is that? I mean, I'm presuming that that's mentioned twice because we do sort of consult with the Youth Council about their availability.
Yes, I think the plan is to have a discussion about the Youth Council involvement at the June meeting and then have the actual session at the September meeting.
Ah, right, okay, yes. That makes more sense. So would the September meeting be a good meeting to have the report on the counselling in schools, perhaps?
I think so. That would make perfect sense, definitely, yes. We'll get that added in, Leader.
See if anybody else has got any suggestions of anything that should be on the forward plan at the moment. Do we content to agree the arrangements and programmes, which obviously is flexible and things can be added in later, but for the moment then we're happy to agree that. Great. So we're actually closing at 12 rather than 1. I'm sure people, oh, somebody's got a hand up. It's Nick. Nick, come in.
Can you hear me on the microphone now? Good.
Yes.
I just didn't want us to not take the opportunity to thank you for your contribution to the CPP over the last few years, Elaine. We recognise this is your last meeting of the CPP. We wish you well for your future plans. But I'd just like to take the opportunity of the whole of the audience here, just giving you a brief round of applause and thanking you for your time and wishing you well.
Thanks very much, Nick. I was in closing, I was going to to thank everybody for their contributions over the years. It's been interesting to change. I actually think our partnership working has improved in 5 years. I think we have learned from each other, and that things are, I think we are working well together as a community planning partnership board. And just to thank everybody because there's been a number of different members over the 5 years, so it's to thank everybody for their contributions, and wish you all well. Thank you.